right, so welcome to our second afternoon session in the Blue Room. I am happy to welcome Andreas Pflugrath, a software architect joining us from Excellent Solutions. His day-to-day work is mostly about designing and developing freestyle SAP UI5 applications. And so related, the topic of today's talk is a giant leap, upgrading a custom-built OpenUI5 front end from 184 to 120.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I'm happy to be here, so let's get started. Sorry? Yeah, mic should be working, fine. Okay, so yeah, my main object of interest at work over the past few years has been a large freestyle OpenUI5 application, which we have been developing and maintaining these past few years. And as with most apps running for a long time, the time inevitably came to switch to a newer UI5 version. And that's what I can talk about today. So first off, I will show why am I here and what you might take away from this talk. Introduce the front end in question a bit more. And then at the heart of this talk, I will present our upgrade journey, garnished with some final thoughts in the end. So when we started development in 2021-22, the main UI5 version, or the LTS version, was 1.84. So we used that for the most part, and we were very content of keeping this version as long as possible. Because one thing to mention about this app, it's running outside of the regular SAP ecosystem, so we weren't subject to any regular update cycles, so we just kept using 184 as long as it worked, and it worked all the time, until the deprecation notice came, and the first announcement was, I think, at the end of 2023. So we planned our upgrade for 1.108, but then the deprecation actually got postponed by a year, and also we had some delays in upgrading. So when the time finally came, the current LTS version was 1.120. And so there was quite a massive gap in versions, and that was a bit scary. So this was pretty much the first reason why we expected or assumed there might be quite a lot of issues when we actually do the upgrade. And we'll see. So we went on the upgrade journey nevertheless, and I will share with you the steps that we've taken on that journey, our goals and methods for each of these steps, and also the hints and tips and tricks and caveats that we experienced or that came from our experience there. And so in the end, this might result in a ready-made plan for you if you also should endeavor such upgrades. Right. So a few more words about the front end in question. So what are the highlights? What are the upgrade relevant features? So it's a very comprehensive, fairly complex freestyle OpenUI5 application that's being used for data management in a public information portal. And as such, it covers a lot of tasks, from handling multiple kinds of business objects, users, some more administrative features, all the way to end-user website design, I kid you not. So in order to facilitate all these features, we are using more than 25 nested components to break these tasks down into manageable technical sets. And of course, we need to integrate all these components, so that makes the application fairly complex. We're also integrating some React components as web components using a consistent Fiori design with fundamental React. So there's another technology coming into play. And of course, the app features heavy customization, custom controls, forms, icons, business logic, all needed to specify the customer needs. And there's no OData involved whatsoever. We're using a Apollo GraphQL client to communicate with the backend. So lots of special features, I would say, some app highlights. Now, relevant for the upgrade are some other features. Of course, we're using a custom theme to fit the design desired by the customer. We're integrating these components on multiple levels, so these integrations need to be handled. Errors are handled more or less centrally, but still need to be distinguished between all these nested components. And of course, we had to do some alterations to the standard code to really meet all the requirements. So this kind of complexity, these kinds of customizations are the second reason why we expected issues when we were upgrading. We'll see. Now let's depart on this upgrade journey. I will present our plan, and now retrospectively it could be used as a guide to upgrading. So this guide has basically 4 steps. What can we do to get to our goal? First, we did upgrade the custom theme. Then we went to upgrade the library version. And then the remaining steps were concerned with getting the app to work again as expected. And first we adjusted all the standard parts of the application, and then later down the line all the custom parts of the application. And then we should be done, and it should be working in the new version as we would expect it. So updating the custom theme was fairly straightforward. The goal is, of course, the app is using the theme in the new version, and the steps taken are quite straightforward as well. So we opened the theme designer, adjust the version to 1.120, export the theme again, consume it by the app, and then we check the app for inconsistencies. And of course, when working with themes, we need to mind maybe there's custom CSS in the theme itself, maybe there's custom CSS in the application itself. So this needs to be checked and adjusted. For us, luckily, we didn't have any custom CSS in the theme. We did have some custom CSS in the application. And this was the first surprise to us. We only had a single place in the application where we need to do some adjustments. So it says a single CSS class had to be adjusted. It's actually some CSS selectors we had to add, but there was only one place to adjust. And then the theme and the app looked just the way as it looked in the previous version. So that was nice. Now it was time to upgrade the library version, so we changed the version number in all the places where it had to be changed, so configuration files, UI5 YAMLs, bootstrap scripts that were used throughout these different components at different places. And one thing I was happy about was that we could use the evergreen version in our bootstrap script, so that's something you can do if you have this version gap. At these places, we don't have to use the specific patch version anymore, just use the evergreen version and be happy with it. In other places, this wasn't possible, so we still have to maintain the patch versions from time to time. We also used this chance to unify the version across all our components because they were historically developed or from time to time, and the patch versions were growing apart. So we now have a level playing field with the same patch version, with the same 1.120 version all again. One minor thing to note, we also updated the URL for the CDN because that changed from hanaondemand.com to ui5.sap.com some time ago. So we updated this. And while you're at it, this is as good a time as ever to upgrade the UI5 tooling, or in general your tooling, when you're undertaking such an upgrade process. So now the app was using the new version, and of course, as expected, it didn't work in all the places until we were done with the other parts. So let's look at this, starting with the standard parts. Well, the goal was all the standard elements of the app should work post-update the same way as they were before the update. And there are actually 3 separate areas which you need to address, or which we needed to address. First of all, we needed to address all the required adjustments at design time. So looking at deprecations, of course, with this version gap, there had come a lot of deprecations, and I will show an example for that. But we also wanted to facilitate some technical innovations. We're talking about 3 years of advancements in the UI5 framework, so there was a lot we could do, and I would like to share one example there as well. And of course, in the end, you need to look at the runtime and detect any functional or even breaking changes within the app itself or within the running app and fix them to get it to work as it was before. And one hint I can give already, this is where you can really leverage these provided tools. Today, we also already learned about the UI5 linter and its new capabilities, so that's a hot candidate for using. Also, the support assistant might be of some help, and well, all the tools that you have at hand with developing UI5 can really help you get going a lot quicker here. Right. So let's look at each of these subtopics with one example, or at least one example: the deprecations, the innovations, and the breaking changes. Now, with the deprecations, our most prevalent deprecation was pseudo-modules. As you might know, some time ago or in the earlier days, things like value state, button type, placement type, flex render type, whatever, we would use or we would require as a pseudo-module and use it like a regular module whenever we had to reference to it. Now, of course, with the update, that was deprecated, and our browser console was overflowing with deprecation errors. So, of course, we needed to address that. And the first instinct was to use just the global access, so we just go to SAP UI core value state and so on. And it worked, of course, but it wasn't really the best thing to do. As we learned when we started using the UI5 linter, then the linter console was overflowing with you can't access globals or you shouldn't. Okay. So, well, back in the time, this wasn't completely clear from the documentation what the best way to load these modules is. Now it's perfectly well documented, and the best practices are there to read up on and to use. And again, using the UI5 linter from the get-go will save a lot of work, especially now with the auto-fixing capabilities that are coming to it. Another topic was the registration of enumerations. But I'm not going to go into that. Let's instead move on to the technical innovations. And one example here is the creation of component content. I already said we're using a lot of nested components in our application. And I did a talk on this topic in 2022 at UI5Con, where I presented how we are using these components or how we are using the same component in different instances for different purposes. So basically, we need to dynamically create the content for this component, and that means creating the root view for the component dynamically at runtime. And in 184, the create content method of the component couldn't return promises. So we had to use the synchronous sub-UI XML view method, and I wasn't really happy about that. Now, post-upgrade, create content does return promises. So now we can use the asynchronous XML view create method. And not only did this make me happy, it also sped up our component instantiation. The app loaded noticeably faster, which was really great. It also brought with it some timing issues. Now suddenly these nested apps were loading so fast that model data which was propagated and the apps were expecting just wasn't there yet. So we needed to address that as well. But that's a small price to pay for the app loading a lot faster. Now on to the breaking changes. This is actually a screenshot of the video of the talk I did in 2022. And it shows how we are using these different components in different instances. And back then, we were getting conflicts in our error messages because we were using the message manager, as you would do with messaging. But now, since it's the same component, we were getting some message conflicts. Using all these nested components, integrating them, there were some overlaps. And our solution back at the time was don't use the global message manager, don't share the message manager between these components. Use component-specific instances of the message manager instead. So this worked quite well. Now, with the upgrade, the message manager was deprecated, and oh boy, the replacement messaging now is this global static namespace which you can't create instances of. So, and you can't extend it easily. So now basically our entire error handling was broken in a way that all components were showing all the errors of the other components, which is not a state we wanted to be in for too long. Now we had 3 options of fixing this. Keep using the deprecated message manager. We didn't want that. Rewriting major parts of our error handling. We definitely didn't want that. Or customizing the messenger to still fit our custom concept. And so we did that. So the standard messaging, as I said, we can't really extend it. So we copied its functionality to facilitate our own needs. And the culprit in these duplicated messages or in these messages that couldn't be distinguished between the components, it wasn't really the message manager, it was the message model. We needed to have different message models for each different component so we could specifically display these errors. Now, our fix was to adjusting the messaging in a way that instead of having just one message model, we could now, or components could now use or require several named message models. And then again, we could use our old ways of handling messages. Now, of course, the downside to this is now we have one more place in the application where we actually have copied framework code. Now, with the next update, once we move to 1.136 or whatever the next LTS we will be upgrading to will be, we need to check this again to copy this again. It's a bit of a downside, but it still works out. Now, another breaking change. This is what I like to call the component ID incident. Because what you need to know about our application and our nested components is most of these nested components or embedded components will be assigned a stable ID. And we need to know the stable ID at runtime for some functionality. Now, prior to the upgrade, we could define this ID at the component usages section in the manifest. Post-update, that did no longer work, and another part where our application was broken was discovered. And this actually took some detective work to find the new place where the ID actually should be defined. And finally, we found the place, and it's the target in the routing configuration, where now the ID should live. Now, maybe this has been the correct place to put it all along. We didn't really know, and we didn't really find official documentation about this ID, where to put the ID, actually, and we didn't find any documentation about this change, why the ID at the component usages didn't work any longer. So that was a bit puzzling. But in the end, we got it to work. And that concludes the adjustment of our standard parts in the application. So what's left is adjusting the custom parts. Now, this again has two parts, or two topics. First of all, we need to check our custom modules, our custom controls, as part of the general update routine. And then, as I said, we had some scenarios where we had to stray from the path of using standard best practices, and of course we had to check these instances again. Now, the first, or maybe the hint and caveat here, is if you do this, if you stray from the standard path, carefully document these changes. So with a future update, you can find them easily and have a checklist of what do I need to look at very, very closely. Now, the custom controls and modules, luckily, we can skip because we didn't have any adjustments there that were non-standard. We were using the best practices, so all our custom modules really worked after the update without having to do anything. And all the effort that was required was in this second part, where we did some non-standard adaptations. And what do I mean with that? Well, lots of our components for these technical features are using the object page layout. And as you might know, we can get a little icon in the anchor bar of the object page layout using the custom anchor bar button aggregation. What this doesn't do is it doesn't give you the icon in the overflow area. So if your object page has many sections, you won't see the icon in the overflow area. The requirement, however, was for us to get the icon there in the object area because it was used as a marker of where there's work to be done. Now, this was an interesting part to get working because responsible for the creation of these items in the overflow area is the anchor bar. And we can extend the anchor bar and adjust the necessary steps to get the icon in there. However, the anchor bar is not used directly by the object page layout. It's used by a helper class which holds the instance of the anchor bar. And this helper class is not public, it's not exposed by the UXAP library. So this is another step where we had to say, let's just copy the framework code we need, make our own custom module, and then adjust the import so we can use our extended anchor bar. And then we just extend the object page layout to use our custom helper class, and then everything worked. But again, this is one place we need to go and check at every update because this might break again with the next update. Right. However, that was it. Afterwards, our application was pretty much running again. So in summary, again, this was a very, very complex, very highly customized UI5 application, and the gap inversions was quite substantial. And there were these two unexpected troublemakers at the standard parts, and of course our custom parts did produce some work as was expected, but then that was it. So given the size of the application, given the substantial gap inversions, we were really surprised at just how well the upgrade went. There were surprisingly few issues, and we were able to manage this very easily. So my verdict is upgrading UI5 is easy. Our approach worked very well. We need to mind our custom concepts and stay within the standard as much as possible, because otherwise you get punished. But UI5 will handle the rest. What an awesome framework. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Andreas. Perfectly on time. Do we have any questions in the audience? One here.
How much time did it take to upgrade this app?
I think the entire upgrade was done within a week, or not working full-time even, so let's say just 3 to 4 days, or let's say 4 days.
Just
until
by
the entire...
one person?
Sorry?
Only
pretty much myself, yes.
All right. Anybody else?
Okay, so I'm wondering which issues you would have if you would just use one message model like it's foreseen in the standard. What problems did you have that you couldn't solve unless you create several models?
So imagine you have some kind of management component, and you have a different, you're managing a different kind of entity within a dialog. So just some additional information maybe that's just managed by a different component. You open this different component in a dialog, and you produce an input error, some kind of error, and the error message gets put to the message manager. Now this error will be displayed once in the dialog, because the component in the dialog has a footer displaying your error, and that's where the error belongs, because it occurs in this embedded component. But also the embedding component would show the same error. And the error wasn't really produced there, and we just didn't want to display the error in the outer component as well. So we would have an error display in the dialog as well as in the actual component in the background, and that just wasn't desirable. And another way would have been to somehow mark these errors and have some logic. You can display them here, you cannot display them here, but we didn't want to go down that route, and at the time, the separate message managers was far easier to implement.
Okay, I cannot tell you how Fiori Elements does it, but I think they should have the same issue, and they work with one message model. And in the end, every message has a control ID. You can check where this belongs to. Yeah, so if you have a message that comes from an OData model, there's a path there. You can also check the path, and you can filter on that. Maybe, yeah, in the future that would be the simpler way, because once you're there on the standard, yeah, you don't need to do anything with the next upgrade.
Right. Yeah. That's the nice thing to do. Of course, at the time, this just didn't work. I mean, we added the message to the message manager, and we expected it to just be displayed where it should be. So maybe, yeah, that would be something to get to the bottom to. By now, the app is far too huge to adjust it at one time, or to adjust it feasibly. But yeah.
All right. I guess no more questions. So thank you again.
Thank you.